Hey guys, hello, hi, good evening, good evening. Thank you for joining a Friday evening session. Before we get into the session, I'll just start off with a quick short introductory video and then we'll jump right into the session.
हे दोस्तों, वेलकम टू अपना कम्युनिटी। ये वो जगह है जहां आप अपने असली पोटेंशियल को एक्सप्लोर कर सकते हैं। देखो, सबके पास स्किल्स होते हैं, पर क्या आपके अंदर वो स्पार्क है जो आपको कामयाबी की ऊंचाइयों तक ले जा सकता है? अगर आप सोच रहे हैं जॉब चेंज करने के लिए लेकिन रेज्यूमे सेलेक्ट नहीं हो रहा या फिर इंग्लिश में इंटरव्यू देना थोड़ा चैलेंजिंग लग रहा है, तो फिक्र मत कीजिए। यहां हम हैं आपके साथ, आपको सपोर्ट करने के लिए। अपना कम्युनिटी में आपको मिलेगी बेहतरीन कम्युनिटीज जहां आप अपने प्रोफेशनल स्किल्स को सुधार सकते हैं। चाहे आप एक्सेल, टैली, जीएसटी में माहिर बनना चाहें या फिर आप खुद एक ब्यूटिशियन या डिजाइनर हैं, तो यहां आप अपने काम को शोकेस करके दूसरों को टिप्स एंड ट्रिक्स देते हुए आगे बढ़ सकते हैं। अपना कम्युनिटी में आपको मिलेगा मेंटर्स का एक खजाना और बड़े इन्फ्लुएंसर्स का साथ जो आपको हर कदम पर 1-to-1 गाइड करेंगे। यहां आप ज्वाइन कर सकते हैं अपने फील्ड या इंडस्ट्री स्पेसिफिक ग्रुप्स, जहां आपको ऐसे कई लोग मिलेंगे जिनसे सीख के आप वो गलती ना करें जो वो कर चुके हैं। ऐसे लोगों की जिन्होंने स्टार्ट किया था एज एग्जीक्यूटिव्स एंड आर नाउ सक्सेसफुल मैनेजर्स इन देयर डोमेन्स, जो आपको आगे बढ़ाने में मदद करेगा। यहां आपको मिलेगा वो सही डायरेक्शन जो आपकी करियर को नेक्स्ट लेवल ले जाएगा। तो लेट्स अनलॉक योर पोटेंशियल टुगेदर। अपना कम्युनिटी में ज्वाइन करें और अपने सपनों की ऊंचाइयों तक पहुंचने का सफर शुरू करें।
Thank you guys. Thank you for joining. My name is Rohan. I'm one of the co-founders of QFirst, which is a mentorship platform or a mentor aggregator platform supporting Apna with Apna Exclusives. So we've been doing Apna Exclusives for quite some time now, for the last couple of months. It happens on weekdays at 7 p.m. and weekends at 3 p.m. The main idea is to help people ideate and advance in their professional careers. We're also covering a wide range of topics, be it spoken English, functional skills, or any technical skills as well. And I also request you to visit the Apna site, register on the link so that you can get access to all our sessions previously conducted over the last couple of months. Today we have Zaki with us, who will be taking us through the DevOps journey from basics to best practices. Zaki is a DevOps engineer 4 at Amazon, and over to you, Zaki, and we can follow the same format as we did last time. Thank you.
Hey, hello everyone. Thanks for the quick intro about me, Rohan. So, just telling about me, I'm Zaki. I'm currently working as a DevOps engineer 4 at Amazon. And yeah, in this journey of being as a DevOps engineer, I got a chance to work upon a lot of complex things and work upon tier 1 related systems, debug multiple issues. In short, like got a lot of experiences by doing a lot of mistakes and all of that. And today in this session, I would be just guiding you through of what is actually DevOps and how can you get started with the DevOps journey. So without any further delay, I would like to get started. And also throughout this session, I just have one request to all of you that during the session, if you have any sort of doubt or if anything is not clear to you, or if you want me to repeat something, then feel free to interrupt me in between. You can raise your hand or you can unmute yourself and speak up, and we can have a discussion on that. Cool. So if that is clear, then let's get started. Yeah. So firstly, just walking out through the agenda of this session. So as Rohan has already mentioned, you right, that this session is all about the DevOps basics and how we can get started from basics to best practices. Okay, so in this session, firstly, we would be discussing about what is actually DevOps, okay, and its core principles. Because before getting started and discussing more about what are the best practices and everything, right, we should be aware of what is DevOps. So that is something which we would be covering firstly. And then later on, we would be going through the tools, methodologies, and what are the best practices which generally people follow. What was the need of DevOps? And yeah, once we discuss all of these things, we would be going through the resume tips. And like that would be last couple of like 5 to 10 minutes. We would be discussing on the tips for resume preparation. I would be sharing some sample templates and also the kind of template which I personally followed for my while creating my resume and applying it for Amazon. So that is something which I would be sharing. And yeah, at last we would be discussing about some sort of resources what we can follow to learn more about DevOps. Cool. So is the agenda clear? Great. So yeah, let's get started. And throughout the course session, I would request you folks to be interactive. If there is anything of that sort, right? If that is confusing, please let me know. But yeah, just a small request from my end to be interactive throughout the session. Cool. So firstly, what is DevOps? We have folks on the call. So anyone, any idea on what is DevOps? Any idea or anything from anyone? What is actually DevOps? What do you think is DevOps? Anyone? Just give a rough guess. What do you think DevOps mean?
I think DevOps is basically related to developer and operations related tasks, and it is a integration of something like that.
Correct. Rightly pointed. So that is something part of what DevOps is. The term DevOps, right? Development and operations, as rightly pointed by Sunny, that it means that you are having something related to developer and operations. Now, that is something which generally people know. But what is actually DevOps? So if you say DevOps, it is a kind of very broadly used term. Okay, there is no proper kind of like saying that this is a proper meaning of what is DevOps. It is nothing of that sort. DevOps is kind of very broad term. If we say it is a kind of culture or the kind of mindset which teams generally have incorporated into their organizations to run the businesses, to handle the way deployment happens. So if I just summarize over here, right, you cannot categorize DevOps into development operation in that way. It is a kind of very broad term. Okay, it is a kind of culture and operations. So over here, as rightly pointed, right, in this we will be trying to make sure that the development and the operations teams work together seamlessly, because the ultimate aim would be over here to deploy the application seamlessly. As a developer or as a service owner, right, what we want is whenever we make any changes to the service, we want those changes to be visible to the user seamlessly. That is something which we expect whenever we create any sort of feature or do any kind of performance improvements, bug fixes, anything, right? So that is something which would be the basic expectation from the service owner. And to have that process being done in a seamless manner, DevOps is something which comes into the picture. Now, when we say, just a moment, yeah. Now we say that DevOps is something which got evolved into like very recently, right? So from last couple of years, couple of decades, we are having DevOps. But what was the need of DevOps over here? Anyone over here? Can you just give me a rough idea of what was the need of development and operations when we were having development and operations teams? But what was the need of DevOps to come into picture? When we were having the deployments happening, even before the DevOps was existing, right? Even before DevOps was existing, the deployments used to happen, new features used to be like released, all of that thing used to happen. Then what was the need for DevOps to come into picture? Anyone? Any guesses?
Yeah, basically, I think it is for streamlining the deployment phase.
Correct. Correct, Sunny. Anything else? What do we mean by streamlining the deployment phase? What was the need for here for us to streamline that process? What do you think were the challenges? Any idea?
Yeah, in a regular development and operations team, they used to practice certain tips and tricks to deploy, but in DevOps, they unify to basically solve the problems which they found while completing the project, I think.
Yeah, that is correct, Sunny. So if we say, right, earlier what used to happen was in the traditional model, what we call, right, before DevOps, we call it as a kind of traditional model. Over there, what was happening was that generally we know that whenever we get any sort of job, we would be trying to complete that job, whatever is assigned to us. We would be saying ki that is my main priority. If let's say we are having development team and operations team, okay, the developers would be focusing upon featuring the thing, whatever new features would be there or whatever bug fixes are to be there, they would be focusing on fixing those. correct? What would the job of operations team would be? To ensure that whenever any changes are being built, seamlessly they should be promoted to the production or to the end user, what we call it as the end user, right? So over here, what used to happen was developers used to write the code, whatever was done, and they used to send it to the operations team. Then operations team used, like, they were not aware of what were the code changes being made over here, right? What was the code, what is the logic, what is the main actual coding part, they were not aware of it. They used to just focus on maintaining the servers, ensuring that the deployment happens seamlessly, or there is no interruption during the deployment. That was something which was a kind of what we call role for operations, role for developers. Over here, they both were focusing upon kind of like doing their job, getting their job done. Okay, that was the main thing. And what happens is, in a best scenario or in a happy case scenario, development team used to provide the code, and operations team used to like deploy it to the production. Everything goes smoothly. But imagine a scenario wherein that deployment leads to a kind of like that was a faulty deployment or something of that sort, which leads to impact to the customers or the end users. What do you think would be happening over here? Any guesses? Any idea? This was a thing. This is a kind of scenario which could occur, right? Because the teams are working independently over here. They are not working in a collaborative manner. The development team is unaware of how the deployment is going to happen, and the operations team is not aware of how did the code testing and everything happen over here. So both of them are not aware of their changes in a proper manner. So what do you think could be the possibilities or possible cases of issues could occur over here? Any idea? Any guesses from anyone? No matter if that is wrong, just speak up. That should be fine. Share your opinion. What could be what could go wrong if let's say the deployment developer creates a feature and that gets deployed to the server or the end user. After that, the user started to report the issues. Now, what do you think could happen over here?
Yep. It will eventually hamper the end result of the product, and the
Exactly.
result which the end user wants, that will not be there because of the faulty development and deployment.
Exactly. So that is something which happens, and because of that, what happens is now there is this issue, right? So now the blame game would become something which would be coming up, correct? So the blame would be going on. The developer would be saying, "Ki, you didn't do the deployment properly. Maybe the testing didn't happen properly, correct?" And the operations team would be saying, "Ki, you didn't write the code properly." So people would try to like save themselves over here because there is no ownership kind of thing, right? Everyone is focused only on their part. That is something which could happen, and conflict of interest would occur. The deployments would be slowing down, and like any new feature to be deployed, that would be very much delayed. So that was something kind of very much challenging. And to address that part, to address that challenging thing, we know that this is challenging, right? There is no shared ownership. No one is willing to take the ownership of any sort of failure over here. That is something which is very crucial to understand. In this case, both were working independently, because of which they are not willing to take any sort of failure on their head. And to avoid all of these things, DevOps culture came into the picture, which mainly focused upon the communication and the collaboration between the ops and the development team. Over here, there were a couple of principles which we would be going through. Key, what were the strategies in which DevOps, because of which DevOps got evolved over time, right? How did they try to communicate and bridge that gap between development and operations team? How did they try to bring that ownership thing over here? Because ownership is something which is very critical, right? Without ownership, I don't think so like anyone would be able to complete any sort of thing and bring it to a closure. So to bring the things to the closure in a perfect manner or in a proper shape, the what do we call over here, the ownership model was something which was defined. Okay, as I mentioned over here, right, in this we can see that collaboration and communication, and automation of processes and workflows, continuous integration, monitoring and feedback loops for continuous improvement. So what was happening earlier was that there was no room for improvement over here. People were not willing to take the feedback part, correct? Because there was a kind of communication gap, and that is something which is being bridged by DevOps. So now we will be seeing how did that culture help out, help us over here. Correct. That is something which you should understand, right? In the earlier scenario, there was this blame game, correct, wherein people were saying that this is something which is your fault, this is not my fault, this is gonna help not help you out, something all of that sort. Correct. Now, what happens in this DevOps culture? Okay, that is something which you should understand. What happened after DevOps evolved? Any idea or any guesses from anyone? Any guesses from anyone? So I'll just say what happened over here was, because due to DevOps, the things started to go in a seamless manner. That is, what do we mean by seamless manner? That is something which we should understand, right? So what used to happen is, earlier the team used to work in a separate manner, right? The development team was not aware of the things what are being done by ops. Ops were not aware of the dev teams. Now, with DevOps coming to picture, there were some sort of methodologies, correct, or the best practices and the tools which the people started to use. Now, first thing was the communication gap, right? So to address that communication gap, they tried to come to a common bridge wherein they would be discussing about the operational related issues. What do we mean by operational issues? Operational issues in the sense key, what kind of failures are we seeing in the infrastructure being set up? Are we observing any sort of anomalies over here? Some sort of reviews mechanism started to happen over here on a weekly basis. That is something which happened over here. Because of this collaboration and communication thing, the what we call over here, the communication gap got reduced. And the development team were aware of what kind of things the ops are doing, and ops were aware of what kind of things the development team are doing over here. The knowledge gap was getting removed. That was the main thing which kept DevOps being evolving. With that, what happened was the planning used to happen in a proper manner. And over here, there were a couple of tools which were being used to ensure that the deployment happens in a seamless manner. We'll see what are the tools being used. So this is something which we should remember, okay, or which we should understand in specific. And these things helped in faster mitigation of issues. Now, whenever any deployment happens, any faulty deployment in specific, or any issue occurs in the production system, in such cases, the issue mitigation would be happening in a faster manner. That is something which used to happen after DevOps came into picture. And the downtime of the system got reduced. What do we mean by downtime over here? Downtime is the thing, if let's say, for what duration of time your service would be unavailable to the users. Earlier, the downtime for the services used to be very high. Like people used to just say 90% availability, 95% availability, something of that sort. But as DevOps organizations or the companies, right, they started to implement these DevOps methodologies, DevOps best practices, their availability also got increased. Okay, their service availability got increased. And also, they focused upon automating the tasks, like a lot of manual tasks was being done for setting up the infrastructure and all of that. But due to the tools being used, all of these automations coming to picture, the manual efforts got reduced. Now, do you think all of this happened overnight? What do you think? Did it happen all overnight? How did this complete mindset shift happen over here? Any idea? Was it a one-day job, or what do you think? Am I audible firstly? I'm not able to hear anyone.
Guys, if you don't want to unmute yourself and speak up, you can also put it in the chat box.
Yeah, that should also be fine.
You're audible.
Cool. Thanks for the confirmation, Priya. Great. So yeah, what do you think causes mindset shift to happen? How difficult was it for the organizations to adopt the DevOps methodology? Are so far, like, are the things clear? Are you trying to understand, like, whatever we spoke? Are those things clear, or anything is not clear to you folks? Okay, awesome. Anjali says yes. What about others? Whatever we discussed so far, is it clear?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. So now to have for this shift to happen, right? It didn't happen overnight. Over here, there were lots of improvements which the people or the organizations try to do over time. What do we mean by the improvements over here? Correct. So if you see in this picture, right, I put a lot of tools over here. If you see over here, we are having JUnit 5, we are having Docker, we are having Travis CI, we are having a lot of things I put. Currently, these things would not be like, you may not be aware of it. That's completely okay. Over here, if you see in this picture, right, we see that firstly, this is a kind of implementation part which got evolved over time. Firstly, if you see, the planning got happened over here. Earlier, this used to not happen. Now, in this infinite loop of cycle, right, if you see, this is somehow the evolvement happened. Firstly, the planning got happened. Okay, the teams used to sit together on a weekly basis or whatever thing the frequency would be. They started to plan the things, that is whatever changes would be coming up in future, or whatever changes are to be deployed. Correct. They started to create a plan for that. How would we be doing that plan? How would we be keeping on evolving from our mistakes? If let's say we did a deployment that led to a failure, then what is something which is to be done? Instead of playing that blame game, you did the mistake, I did the mistake, people started to learn from their mistakes. That is somehow like they started to do the post-mortem of the issue, do the root cause analysis. What caused that issue? Was it the deployment related part? Was it the process, something which was to be improved over here? Was it a code deployment fault, or whatever that can be? So people used to sit together, plan all of those things. This was something which happened in the past, and now this is something which could be happening, and this is a guardrail which we are trying to put. We are trying to avoid such scenarios in future. That is something which happens during the plan phase. Now, once the planning is done, what happens is developer writes the code, they push it to the code repository, and after that is being done, that is where the DevOps or whatever automations we build, that is something which comes into the picture. Okay, we have tools for ensuring that whatever changes are being done gets deployed to the end user, or the pipeline in specific. The term pipeline may not be like, you people may not be aware of it. I'll just tell what is that firstly. But yeah, over here what happens is the build process happens. Build in the sense is whatever changes you make, they gets compiled into a specific product kind of thing, and after that the testing happens over here. Earlier we should have separate team, okay, for doing the manual testing part of thing, but later on, like due to the emerging trends, the softwares, right, we started to automate the testing process as well. There are some sort of testings, let's say for unit testing, wherein you would be testing the specific piece of code. Okay, specific piece. If let's say on your UI you are having a button being put up, you would test whether that button is working or not. Similarly, you are having an integration test. You will see in that, as part of that automated testing, you will ensure that whenever that button is clicked, or whatever would be the expected action, maybe that would be invoking some other function, some other page, or whatever that can be there, the end integration should work fine. So somehow that kind of testing should happen. And once the testing is done, what we do over here, that is we release it, and we deploy it to the end user. After deploying, our work doesn't end over there. We also have tools
Hello.
to keep on monitoring continuously. Okay, sorry, I see
Yeah,
some.
I have a question here.
Yeah, Priya.
See, suppose if we are working in an agile environment, and suppose I am working in a sprint, so the output of that particular sprint includes the testing also. So, like if a developer is pushing the code in the GitHub, so before that he'll do the testing itself. So like, is there any tool in the DevOps that, like, you said right now that there is automation that we are doing in the testing part also. So is there any tool that we use to test the thing, or otherwise, like, generally we used to create the use cases and then test and then do it all, like for the UAT or for the security testing or for the integration testing kind of thing?
Yeah, that is really a good question you have asked, Priya. Thanks for asking. So when we set up the pipeline, right, as part of the pipeline setup, so if I just tell key to people who are not aware of what is a pipeline in specific is just a kind of, if let's say if we imagine the pipelines being put at our home, right, in that the water flows seamlessly. So keeping that in mind, Similarly, we came up with the concept of pipeline in DevOps as well. So what happens over here is whenever the developer pushes the code to the GitHub repository or any source code management, if that is on GitHub, GitLab, or any other source code management repository, right? Whenever the changes are being pushed, we create the pipeline in such a way that firstly the build happens and we do that replication of the environments over here. Okay, so whenever that, normally we know that the developer does a testing at his local place. They may be right, they are the one who would be writing the unit test, integration test. And what happens over here is we know that the test may pass locally, but there can be some scenarios. We have heard about this term, right? It works on my system, but
Yeah.
it may not work on something of that sort. So what we try to do as part of our pipeline setup is that we try to create a replication of the environments. What do we mean by replica of environment? Environment in the sense is a production system. We know what is a production system, right? That is a place wherein we get the live traffic. So instead of doing the testing and waiting for the end user to come back with some sort of issues or something, right? What we try to do is we try to create a replica system in the pipeline. Now what happens is the changes doesn't go directly to the end user. After the build is done, they gets deployed into the test environment. We call beta environment, gamma environment, whatever that can be. Just we should remember this part key. That is a replica of the production environment. And now the changes gets deployed over there. After that is being deployed, we try to have this test being running up over there. In that approval workflow, right, whatever environment would be there, on top of that, we create some approval workflows. Now you may be asking, what is an approval workflow? Approval workflow in the sense is whenever the deployment happens in a particular environment, we try to run some automated test over there. And once those tests get passed, in that scenario only, the automation would be approving that promotion, whatever would be the right changes. Once that promotion is being approved, that gets deployed to the production.
It's
Now,
in,
yeah, Priya.
it's inbuilt in the system, like in the DevOps operation.
No, that is not inbuilt. We do that setup part over here. We create those environments. We add those approval workflows. We add those plugins. We have the plugins. So we have that option to do that. For that, we need to make changes in the code, make changes in the pipeline. A lot of changes would be involved over here.
So that's particularly based upon the client to client setup.
Exact. It depends upon the service. What is the service doing? Is it a tier one use case? Tier one means like what is the importance of that service? What are the best practices to be done over there? What kind of issues could happen? Based upon that, we would be setting up the pipeline.
Okay.
To answer it simply, it is not something which comes by default. This is something which we would be putting. So based upon our lessons learned, based upon like the deployment practices which we should follow, all of those things. Got it?
Yes. Thanks for answering.
Cool. Most welcome. So yeah, that is now we will be seeing how that evolved, right? So over there, first thing is on the cross-functional team part. That is away team model. If the teams are working from some other team, people are working on a specific project. Okay, on one project, multiple teams are working. In such cases, how should the collaboration happen over here? How should be they sharing the responsibilities? So instead of like giving the complete blame part over here, taking the ownership of specific part and having that shared responsibility model in place. So that is something which used to happen as DevOps was getting evolved, and we were having these tools. So as Priya asked, right, does that comes by default? Does DevOps has that power to give everything by default? No, the things would be keeping on evolving based upon the tools we use. Okay, for creating that pipeline, the one which I mentioned earlier, right? We have some tools, Travis CI, Circle CI. There are some tools available for creating that pipeline. Okay, once that pipeline is being created, we have some other plugins to be added. We have some other softwares to be added to test the unit test. For unit test, we are having this JUnit, and similarly, based upon the code, whatever we write, based upon the tech stack, the unit test or the coverage test, the software which we use would be varying. So that is something which we do. And for monitoring, I also put one more part over here in the eighth thing. If you see, right, we are having that monitoring thing. What do we mean by monitoring? Is it something which we sit continuously and look, or what do you guys think monitoring would be over here? Any guesses, any idea? What do you think monitoring is? Any idea from anyone?
might be you run the code and the testing is done by the JUnit after doing all the plugins, and then like might be there is some mail or message kind of facility which will pop up into your email to get to know, okay, the deployment has been completed or the testing has been completed successfully, or there is an error, or if there is an error, so what kind of error, if that facility is available to it.
Exactly. Rightly said, Priya. So it is not just there on the development aspect. So the thing which I mentioned is more on the development related part, right? Now, what happens after the deployment happens? So we have those kind of setup in place. We have some softwares, we have some tools which helps us monitor the application's performance after that is being deployed. Because our main concern would be what happened after the deployment, whether the calls being made, are they getting slowed down? We have observed these issues, right? Sometimes the applications which we use get slowed down. In such cases we say ki server busy aa raha hai, server is busy, maybe the application is not working properly. We have heard about these terms very regularly, correct?
Load testing kind of thing.
So load testing is something which we do in the before deploying it to the production. So the approval workflow which I said, right? Over there we do this load testing, integration testing, regression testing. Lot of testings would be there. Okay, we also do some security related testing, audit. All of that happens automatically. Whenever the code is being pushed, that happens automatically. Now, during that process also we do the monitoring. In the load testing, as you rightly mentioned, we see whether the code being pushed, is it causing any sort of what do we call performance issues on the system, whether is it consuming a lot of system resources, is the CPU utilization getting increased, and all of that part, right? Is the latency getting increased, is the error being increased, or what is the success rate, what is a failure rate, all of those things. And we have this kind of similar setup being done on the production environment. So we have tools such as Prometheus, Grafana, Splunk, a lot of other tools are there. And people generally, like in organizations, right, they have some customized versions of these tools being built up for their use cases. Yeah, so using these tools, what do the teams do is they try to monitor it. So as you mentioned, right, if something goes wrong, then we should be alerted. So there are mechanisms using which people would be alerted. So either a phone call would be coming up triggering whenever any issue happens, or an email would be triggered, or some sort of applications would be there which people call as pager. Okay, that would be just kind of like giving an alert kind of sound to the user. Something got broken into your system. Now it is your responsibility to look into it. So after checking, you'll be getting a clarity on what got broke. Did the latency got increased? Latency is a time in which you will be providing the response to the user. Are we giving the, like, let's say earlier it used to provide the response in 1 second. Now is it providing in more than 5 seconds? What is the delay over here? Something of that sort. We put the thresholds over here. That kind of configuration is something which we do to get ourselves alerted. And yeah, once the alert is being triggered, we try to like sit on the issue, try to work together and see what can be done, whether we need to roll back the deployment happened, or how can we mitigate the issue. So that is something which comes in this DevOps environment. Okay, DevOps culture. Now we know these are something which happens. So what can be the secrets for that? It is very simple. That is, firstly, fostering on the collaborative environment. That is, collaboration is a must, and that is a key over here. And after that, yeah, I see someone speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to disturb you. If I have missed the initial part, have you discussed about like creation of the Docker and the concept of Kubernetes and all?
No, Priya.
So are you going to cover in this, or there will be other session for that?
There can be some other session. In this, I'm just trying to give a kind of very broad level overview of what is DevOps, what kind of tools we would be making use of, and how did it evolve, what kind of best practices we can follow. That is something which we would be discussing.
Okay, thank you.
Most welcome. So yeah, coming to the secrets and core principles. So we see that it is more on the collaboration part and ensuring that the ownership is something which gets established. So that is a main principle on which DevOps gets standard. And that was a main reason or DevOps got evolved over here. And DevOps came into picture. And after that, we have this automation. As I just said, right, there are automations which we build for testing the flow, for integration test, load test, all of that. So we have lots of automations being built up, and use those automations in the pipeline in a such a manner that the manual effort would be reduced, the issues whatever could occur could be minimized, whatever impact could occur, if let's say some impact happened, how can we minimize that impact? That is something which is a secret or principle, core principle we call. And also lastly, the not lastly, there can be many other principles, but yeah, the main thing is on the measurement part, that is continuously monitoring, because monitoring is a key over here. It helps us identify key how is our application working. If let's say that deployment happened, did it result in any sort of errors, did it result into any sort of performance improvement, or whatever can be there. So we just don't go with the word of mouth over here, we go with the data driven decisions. So how can we take data driven decisions? How can we gather that particular data? How can we create some sort of visual what's called visual basics, so that we can understand and identify what is going on, what is happening with the system, all of that things. Cool. So now coming to the tools. So as you said, these are all the things which we are doing. We are doing the automations, we are creating the pipelines and all of that, right? So to do all of these things, we require some sort of power, right? And that power is nothing but the tools which we make use of. Anyone aware of like what kind of tools can DevOps be using? Any idea from anyone? Have you heard of any sort of DevOps tools? Anyone on the call? Did you hear about any of the DevOps tools anytime? Okay, I see Anjali to say yes. So can you name any of them? Okay, I see Rajesh raised the hand. Yeah, Rajesh, you have something to ask? Good. So going
I
over
think
here.
Docker, Kubernetes, these are the tools for DevOps.
Yeah, they are the tech stack what we call. We make use of Docker tools. Yeah, correct. Rightly said, Anjali. Thanks for adding it. Yeah. So firstly, like as I said, continuous integration and continuous delivery. That is the main focus, right? That whatever changes we make, they should be delivered continuously. Okay. So there are teams who does lots of deployments on a daily basis, but they have some sort of frequency being set up. The main thing is that whenever the deployment is being planned, whenever the changes are being pushed, they should be delivered in a seamless manner. Correct? That is the main focus. So for that, we have tools such as Git for managing the version control over here, Jenkins for creating the pipeline. Similarly, we have Terraform for creating the infrastructure part and all of that. How does this help? This helps us in building the automations in a proper manner. Okay, automated builds, testing, and deployment part. Now, for deployment thing, we know that there is a cloud provider, right? AWS AWS is a cloud provider. Similarly, we have Azure, GCP. So we do the deployment on the cloud part. Okay, and this helps us in ensuring that the changes are being delivered in a seamless manner. Cool. And now comes the main thing, that is monitoring, because that is something which is very crucial, right? How do you monitor the changes? For that, we have the tools such as Prometheus, Grafana, Splunk, etc. Now, what is Prometheus? I'll just give a brief of what is that. So Prometheus is a kind of software which runs in the background of your application, and it gathers some sort of metrics. What do we mean by metric? Metric is something kind of like simple, what do we call, parameter. Let's say how many requests came in, out of that how many got successful, how many got failed. This is the kind of data which we require. Or what is the CPU utilization, what is the latency, all of that kind of things at a specific time, what happened with the service, what was the CPU utilization. All of that kind of snapshots are being captured by Prometheus. And once those snapshots are being captured, they are being transferred to Grafana. Grafana is a kind of UI dashboard, okay, which helps us to see and visualize the things whatever is going on with our application in live. Okay, I'll just show you a simple dashboard. So this is a Grafana dashboard kind of thing. So if you see over here, right, we are having lots of metrics being put up in a visual in a clear manner. If you see this, we can identify key what is the status of our application, what is our CPU utilization, how is our memory, host memory being there, how many number of calls we got, and out of that how many failures we are having, all of that things. So if you see here, right, the RAM, this is a kind of dashboards which we set up based upon the data whatever we gather from Prometheus. And in Grafana, right, we have some sort of default templates also which we get based upon whatever the default metrics are being captured, right? There are default metrics, default being captured, default dashboards being created. This is something which you can try. Okay. And lastly comes the kind of like infrastructure as a code. This is something which we make use of. So instead of creating the resources manually, or resource in the sense key, creating some EC2 instances, or doing some sort, creating some using an image, all of that thing. So we don't do that. The recommendation is like not to do that manually. We do it via code, because managing the things via code would be much easier. If let's say you want to do the migration at some point of time in future, you want to migrate your service from a specific AWS account to some other AWS account, doing that again same process manually would become overwhelming. So to avoid such kind of scenarios, we generally manage the things via code, and that would be much better, and the audit would be very clean over here. So for doing that, we have tools such as CloudFormation, in AWS we have Terraform and all of those. This helps us in managing the infrastructure in a seamless manner. Cool. And if I just show you a sample template kind of thing, how would that be looking? We just define it would be kind of like simple XML kind of file, wherein you would be say key what is the description, what are the resources which we want to allocate. Over here, if you see, what do you think it is doing? Any idea from anyone or any guesses? It is just simply like creating an EC2 instance, getting an image, and just allowing it on a specific port. So this is a kind of simple thing. I just put it up over here, that this is how we write the infrastructure as a code template. And once this code is being run, we would be having a micro T2 micro instance being spun up, and people would be able to access it from specific code. Okay, this is something which we do. So yeah, that are kind of tools which we follow. And now coming to the best practices, because this is our agenda, right? See what kind of best practices we should be following or we can follow as a DevOps. This practice has got evolved over time. So we'll be looking at couple of practices over here. Yeah. So firstly, collaboration and cross-functional teams. This is something which is like kind of very crucial to follow. That is, whenever we are having multiple teams been working on a same project or same code base or on a same service, right? So we should try to ensure that we have a mechanism being set up so that the collaboration should happen. There are like tools which people make use of. They connect on teams. They have some sort of what do we call Kanban dashboards being created and Jira dashboards being created, wherein they manage their task, they do the shared responsibility manner and all of those. And over here, the next thing is that we should not have a kind of like individual goals. Having an individual goal is also a good thing, but along with that individual goals, we should also have some sort of shared goals over here. That is, if let's say, what do we mean by shared goals? Example, in a particular service, we got somewhere around 100 issues in last year. In 2023, we got somewhere around 100 issues. Now, as part of our goal, we would be trying to have some sort of 10 to 20% of reduction in the issues being occurring. Earlier, we were having, if we go for a 20% goal, then we would be expecting somewhere around 75 to 80 is our threshold, which we would be configuring, saying ki, if we take a goal of 20% reduction in the issues which got occurred, then in this year, we should have only 80 issues being occurring, something of that sort. So teams try to take shared goals. With this, what happens is the kind of collaborative environments get pushed up. So that is something which is to be kind of best practice. And then automating the testing process. If we solely depend upon the developer to do the testing manually from their end, only do the functional test part, in such cases, what happens is the testing which could happen would be very prone to errors. Okay, due to manual testing being done, there can be some sort of edge cases or scenarios which the developer may not be aware of, that this is something which is to be tested, or they would be in a hurry kind of scenario and they may be missed out on testing part. So to avoid all of these things, we should have automated testing being put up. And as I mentioned earlier, right, where do we put those automation testings? We create a replica of the production environment, have some approval workflows being set up, and in that we do this automated testing being coming up. And then the next thing is the frequent code integration. Any idea or any guesses from anyone? What do we mean by this? Yeah, before proceeding further, so far is the things whatever we have discussed, is it clear? Any doubts or any questions from anyone? Okay, Anjali says no questions. What about others? Yeah, Priya.
No, nothing. I was just try to answer your question, like what is frequent code integration. It's
Yeah.
like when a developer used to write a code and there are 2 or 3 developers are working on different codes. So they put, as you said, like Git is used for the versioning purpose. So when they put the code, they put it as like v 1.0, v 1.1, like that.
Correct.
So once every developer used to complete their code, then we do the integration thing. So I guess that, like, that we do in the frequent code integration. And like as many as versioning has been done, like, any updation on the code, any new thing has been added or any new feature need to be added. So when we update the code, we just push it to the Git and then it get integrated. Might be this.
Yeah, kind of correct, partially correct. It means key, if let's say there are whatever is over here, right? The main intention is that lots of features should not be pushed at once. So that is, if let's say you are a developer, Priya. Priya has created a feature for some sort of time zone conversion into the picture. Okay, in the application, there was some sort of time zone feature which Priya developed, and similarly, Anjali developed a feature for showcasing some new, what we call, new capability. And similarly, Rohan did something, and all of these people have done their features. Now none of these changes are being pushed into the production. Okay, the integration of code didn't happen. Now all of these changes happen like parallelly. They didn't push the changes. Now people are like they reach the deadline and everyone wants their changes to be deployed. Now Priya pushes her changes of time zone. Similarly, Anjali pushes some changes. Rohan pushes some changes. Now with this, what happens is the what we say is like the testing may not happen properly, and the impact of that issue to occur may be very difficult. If let's say any issue occurs, then debugging on like what change caused that issue would be very time consuming. So to avoid such scenarios in ride, what is the recommendation is that whenever you are done with the code changes, just try to push it through. Okay, if maybe not being the pushed to the production or something of that sort, but on a frequent basis the code changes should be in sync. People should be having their repositories to the latest version kind of thing. So that is something which comes in the frequent code integration. Does that make sense, Priya?
Yes.
And similarly, like we have this automated deployment pipelines. That is, whenever any deployment happens, it should happen automatically. It should not wait for someone to come manually see and review it. Okay, they should happen automatically if the approval workflows are succeeded. And similarly, we should have this environment consistency. What do we mean by over here is that whatever tech stack we set up, right, it should be similar to the production stack. In such cases, we would be able to like identify the issues much earlier. When we do that load test, right, over there we would be able to identify the issues much earlier, even before that deployment happens. And we should be having the auto scaling being enabled. What do we mean by auto scaling? If let's say our resources are running out of memory or something of that sort happens, we are running short on resources. In such cases, automatic provisioning should happen over here, so that the end user is not impacted and we are available always. And we have this comprehensive monitoring, as I previously showed that dashboard, right, of Grafana. We should have some sort of comprehensive monitoring, wherein if let's say you go to that dashboard, you should be getting an idea on how is your service functioning, even without logging into the system and checking. Just by seeing that dashboard, you should be getting a visualization on what is happening behind the scenes, how is your service actually performing. Okay, that is something which we should have. And similarly, we should have centralized logging. If let's say we are having multiple microservices, in such cases they would be writing some logs. Log in the sense is simple, that is a kind of event which happened is known as a kind of log. That log lines are something written by developers, some comes by default, by some other dependencies, something of that sort. We can just remember key log is a kind of event which occurs. So lots of event would be occurring on multiple hosts, multiple services. In such cases, we should ensure that all of those logs comes to a centralized place, because whenever any issue happens, we should be, if we are having all of those logs at one place or the history of those events at one place, it would be easy for us to debug. Similarly, we have this alerting, right? We should have the alerting mechanism set up if anything wrong happens. And yeah, we should have the regular reviews if let's say any big major incident occurred, any big outage got occurred, right? In such cases, the team should be working together and come up with some sort of sweet spot to identify what went wrong, how can they avoid such issues in future, and how could they improve the process, all of those things. So such regular reviews should happen. And then we should also have these automated rollbacks. So this is something which I didn't say earlier. So we have this whenever the things are being deployed into production, what happens is we monitor for some time. Over there, we have this monitoring being set up, alarms being set up, automated alarming, right? Alerting. Whenever any sort of monitor goes into alarm, we would be putting some threshold over here. If that goes into alarm, if let's say the number of errors got increased, the CPU utilization got increased, or the latency got increased, so the first thing which goes is like something faulty happened with the deployment. In such cases, the changes should be rolled back, and we would be, that is something which comes in the automated rollback. And similarly, we should have cost optimization practices being done, audit whatever changes we do, or log whatever we do. So these are some of the best practices which we can follow in our engineering part, and these are kind of practices which DevOps in general follows. Any queries, any questions on these things? Are these clear?
Yes.
Thanks for the confirmation. Yeah, so that's all. That is a kind of like basics to best practices. Very, very, very high level overview of what is DevOps. Okay, that is something which I try to cover in these things. And now coming to the end of this, we have done all of these things. Okay, we learned about DevOps and everything. Now, how do we sell ourselves? Correct? How do we showcase our skills? That is something I also created this document, Google document link. I'll share it over here, which you guys can go through. In that, like I put some sample templates, but over here I can just give a general overview of what do we mean by that. So in that, right, in the template, whenever we are creating a resume, we should always try to see how you can summarize your experience in a crisp manner. Crisp in the sense is that it should be concise. Only relevant information should be present. And in your resume, we should try to highlight your technical and soft skills. Okay, if let's say you're having, you did some sort of collaborative manner, you did some sort of integration or whatever that can be, try to highlight your technical part and list down your achievements with some sort of impact. If let's say you may be having some experience, or maybe you have developed your personal project, what can be the achievement of that? Okay, what happened with that particular development? If let's say you're already working trying to do a switch, then what is the work which you have done in the past, and what was the impact of that work? Whether the feature which you have launched that got some millions of dollars of revenue to the company, or brought in a performance improvement, whatever that can be there, just try to list down it with some sort of impact. And yeah, if you did any sort of certifications, include those, and showcase your projects and the contributions. After this, like I'll just show you the template also which I created, and I'll share the docs link as well, Google doc link. You guys can go through that to see to understand what that was a kind of template which I personally used for when I was trying to apply for Amazon. So that was a kind of template I just shared over here. I just put a sample template. Okay, I'll share that. In that, I also put the tips. Let me see how I can open this. Okay, I think that is not opening. I'll just stop sharing and I'll open that Google Doc. Okay, and yeah, so that's how you can prepare your resume. Let me just see if I can share that. Yeah, is my screen visible? Can someone confirm?
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, I just put some of the tips which you should be following. That is like we should try to choose a proper font. Okay, font size should not be too big or it should not be too small. Try to see a sweet spot on 10 to 12 size of that font. And then also people generally try to make use of lots of fonts. If you see, we'll be having lots of fonts being present, right? We are having these kind of fancy fonts also being present. So while creating the resume, right, avoid making use of these kind of fancy fonts. Just go with something very basic or easy to understand. Go with Arial or Calibre, something of that sort. That is something which you should do, and also ensure that the styling gets constant. Maybe you put some yellow color in the top, some orange color in the bottom, some blue color in the bottom between. Don't try to put it that way. Try to maintain a kind of uniformity in the resume. Best recommendation would be to go through a kind of like a simple white background template kind of thing. That will be much easy, better. And whatever you put, right, try to put in a kind of bulletin points. Don't put too many bulletin points or very small bullet points. Okay, try to have a sweet spot over here. Find a sweet spot on what should be the number of bullet points. 4 to 5 should be good enough. Try to put it that way. And then we should also make sure that whatever white space we have, we should not have too much white space in our resume, and we should also not make our resume very much cluttered. Try to see a sweet spot over here. Maintain a kind of like line spacing. It can be somewhere around 1 to 1.5. 1.5 would be too big, so just try to see 1 or 1.15. That should be a kind of better thing. And we should also have the margins. People generally like very much underestimate this part. Try to put a proper margin over here, somewhere around 0.5 to 1 inches. That will be much better. And have a consistent alignment. Okay, alignment in the sense left centered or right centered. I'll also share this doc over here. Just a moment. Yeah, people can go through this doc also. Good. And see key that you'll not be putting lots of bold, or try to put the bold, let's say whatever wording you want to put bold, try to put only those things whatever is impactful, or you want that the person should see firstly on that part. That is somewhere the vision should go. So try to put bold on those things. And don't try to make use of lots of styling, like let's say people would be putting italics, underlining, lot of things into it, putting lot of colors. Don't try to put all of that. And make sure that you have consistent formatting for the dates. Somewhere people put January 5th, and then somewhere people put 0105. So don't do it that way. Maintain a consistent format. And then yeah, this is a kind of like important thing. People generally, they make the resume in the Word document and share that document directly. So what happens with that is maybe some fonts may not be opening in the laptop. There will be lots of compatibility issues. So to avoid all of those things, right, recommendation is to save your resume in a PDF format. People generally put resume.pdf and they just send it. You should not do it that way. Put your name underscore resume, something of that sort. First name, last name, underscore resume. Like Priya underscore Shukla underscore resume.pdf, and try to send it that way. That will be like much better. And whenever the recruiter or anyone sees it, right, it would be easy for them to just identify, okay, this is a resume of Priya, this is a resume of Anjali, this is a resume of Abe, something of that sort. Okay. And based upon that, I just put some sample template over here. You can check this. Firstly, like just put whatever your full name would be, the city or state, phone number, email. LinkedIn and GitHub profile is kind of like very much crucial. People generally don't put this. This is a place where you can showcase your skills. Maybe you did a lot, very good portfolio project, right? That would be hosted on your GitHub. If you have that link being put up over here, people can go through your resume, or they can go through your portfolio, can go through your work, and they will be getting idea of what did this person or this candidate do in the past. What is their coding structure? What is their coding style? How many comments did they make? All of those things, whatever is their activity. And then just give a kind of simple professional summary of whatever you did. Let's say you as a developer, you created something, whatever tools you made use of. Just 3 to 4 lines, very simple. Keep it very simple, and ensure that your experience is kind of put over there. And then you can list down your key skills over there. Key, what are the skills? This should be something which should be put based upon the job description. If let's say in the job description they would be putting some sort of recommended skills, right? Python aana chahiye, Java, all of those things. So Based upon that, you add on the keywords over here, because generally if you see, there is this ATS thing coming into picture, right? Over there they are getting filtered out based upon the keywords. So try to firstly put whatever skills you have, and from the job description maybe you are aware of those skills and you didn't put it, so check that and accordingly alter your resume. And after that, try to put down your professional experience. If let's say you worked as an intern or you worked as a developer, whatever that can be there, right? Just put it. And in that, what was your work? Okay, over here I just put randomly key. I set up, I assisted in Jenkins pipeline, which helped in reducing the manual effort by 30%. You can, if you want, you can furthermore quantify this part. And Docker images, and you implemented the monitoring system, whatever you did, just try to put 3 to 4 points. That should be more than enough. Don't try to put too many, or don't try to put very less. Have a sweet spot of 3 to 4 points. Only put impactful points, okay, whatever work you did. And yeah, you can also put your education part. The reason why I put it in the bottom is because mainly if you go for a job, right, the main focus would be on what did you do. Okay, very less focus would be on the kind of marks gained or something of that. So there are companies which look for this, but focus would be like very minimal if you are going as an experienced. This is something which would be the key highlight. What is your professional experience, or key skills? What is your summary? That would be much more looked into. And then you can put down your certifications, whatever are there. Some couple of projects, if let's say you worked upon some automated infrastructure setup or some sort of project, right? Whatever you did, simple definition of that. And if you have already deployed that application into GitHub or somewhere else, right? If you have hosted it live, you can also put that links over here, put the link. And then yeah, any other extra things which you have did. Similarly, like I put 2 templates which you can go through. This will help you or get a kind of clarity on what kind of things we should be putting in a resume. Okay, cool. And then yeah, coming back to this again on. So yeah, so far is the resume tips clear? Is anyone having any doubts on that? Any doubts, any questions from anyone?
Thanks, Saki. Thanks for your time. Thanks for taking out the entire slot and explaining everything in clear. Hope the session was insightful to the audience here. If there are no more questions, I think we can sign off, and I'll meet you again tomorrow for another session.
I'll also share the resources over here in the chat, which you can go through, like for learning more about DevOps. I shared some YouTube channels which you can go through. They provide lots of insight over there. I personally have gone through those YouTube videos and learned a lot from them. So these are the YouTube videos or channels which you can go through. Some community forums which you can be part of to gain more insights on this. Cool. Yeah, thanks all. If anyone is having any queries or any questions, please feel free to ask. If not, we should be good to drop off.
Awesome. Thanks, Zaki. Thank you, everyone. See you again tomorrow.
Sure. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.